Okay, so welcome to this week's Optimum Health Clinic Facebook Live. And this week we have our latest in a series of patient recovery journeys, which we are exploring. And this week we're talking with Paulie. Paulie, you're based in the Netherlands, right?
Yes, I am.
Where,
Yes.
whereabouts exactly?
In between Amsterdam and Utrecht. So
Okay, nice,
close to
nice.
Amsterdam. Yeah.
Nice. So for the next 20, 30 minutes or so, we're going to explore Paulie's journey. So some of the key lessons along the way, some of the challenges that she's faced along the way, and a little bit about what life is like now on the kind of in the later stages coming into kind of full recovery on the other side. And as is the case with these recovery stories, it's always interesting to have different perspectives and different experiences. Obviously, everyone's journey to recovery is different, and different people will resonate more deeply with different people's stories and different lessons. And we try to have a broad range of different perspectives, people from different ages, different life stages, different pieces of the jigsaw being important for them. So yeah, and people want to post questions. Sometimes people can be a bit shy, and sometimes people like to ask questions live during the session. So we will have some time towards the end where if there are some questions, then I'll put them to Paulie. Yeah, let's jump in. So maybe a good starting point is just a little bit around the time when you first started getting symptoms and what that was like. And I know that it started around 17 years old, and then there was a kind of another kind of a deepening, let's say, of the situation 4 or so years later. But yeah,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about how things started.
Yeah. So I think it started when I was around 17, 18. So I was in the final years of my high school and I was preparing for my exams. And there was this year where I developed a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress around those exams, to the extent that I was not sleeping anymore. So I had a lot of problems getting to sleep and then also sleeping through the night. And I was very fatigued. Um, and I was also having difficulties with eating. So I think that was because of the stress. I could not eat anymore. And I was very isolated. So I had difficulties talking with my friends. And um, yeah, you lose the social side basically. So yeah, I was scared to get out of the house. And it was very difficult for me because I didn't know what was going on, and yeah, there was a lot of anxiety. So I think that was the trigger, like the initial stages.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it's I think it's particularly, I mean, of course, ME chronic fatigue is difficult at any age, but I think it's a
yeah,
particularly difficult age when we don't yet have perhaps the maturity to be able to express our emotions and feelings, and of course some people never develop that maturity, but certainly at 17 years old that's a difficult time. And also I think when our social contact tends to be built around the activities that we do and the places we go, and
yeah,
when we don't have the energy and the capacity to do that in the same way, there's a
yeah,
kind of double whammy in a sense. There's the initial suffering of the experience, and then there's the new isolation which is then created by the experience that becomes its new suffering in a sense.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And also just not knowing what is happening to you and why it's happening to you. I think that was very difficult. And that was on the anxiety side. But also I noticed that just the fatigue. So for example, we would go into Amsterdam with my family, and then the next day my I was so fatigued that I had difficulties with walking, and my legs were really cramped up, so I was in a lot of pain because I did quite a lot of walking the day before. So there I started to notice, like, okay, this is not good. It's not normal. And I was also experiencing a lot of, I was forgetting a lot of things. So yeah, that scared me.
Yes.
But then somehow, well, I dropped one class during high school, so that decreased the stress level a little bit. But I think after a while, the symptoms, they just reduced a little bit, and then I went into uni, so it was yeah, a shift, and that made the symptoms disappear a little bit, I think.
Right.
But I did see several psychologists throughout that period just to help and support me. Yeah, so I think that was initially the situation, I would say.
Yes. Yes. And then it sounds like a few years kind of passed, and life wasn't
Yeah.
quite, you weren't quite back to normal, but you were able to kind of somewhat manage the situation that you were in. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. I think there were phases in that period where I would be okay, and then there was a period where it was a little bit less, and that went on, I think, from 18 until I was around 21. And then I really started to notice the symptoms again. And that was when I was in my first year of my master's degree. Um, and initially it started with digestive issues. So I thought, okay, I have quite a lot of things going on at the moment. So I had quite a tough course for university.
What
And
what were you reading?
my master's is in nutrition. So,
Okay. All right.
and I was doing a special consultancy project. So it was a lot of teamwork and working with external commissioners, and it was quite demanding. Um, and then at the same time, I was looking for a new home because I was going to start my internship after the summer. Um, so I was doing that, and I was also preparing some other work. So it was quite busy, and lots of different things were going on. And then I started to develop digestive issues. So
Right.
I thought, okay, maybe this is some kind of food intolerance. So I started to talk to some people and see if I could cut out some foods or do something about it. But it was those symptoms, and then it was also being really fatigued, and I lost a lot of weight. So I'm quite tall as a Dutch
Okay.
person, and I was already quite skinny. And then I lost, in a short amount of time, I lost around 10 kilos, I think. So
Wow. Okay.
it
That's
was
a lot.
quite
Yeah.
substantial.
Yeah.
So I went into the hospital, and they got me checked out for everything. I think they did
Okay.
tests, and they couldn't find anything. So yeah, I went in quite a couple of times, and my symptoms were getting worse. So I thought, okay, they can't do anything in the hospital, and that's kind of worrying, I thought.
Yeah.
And eventually they said, okay, it's probably irritable bowel syndrome. Um, and I think you get that diagnosis if they can't find anything else, then you have that.
A diagnosis of irritable bowel syndrome is a little bit, it's a digestive equivalent of getting a diagnosis of ME chronic fatigue when you have fatigue. It's like, we
Yeah,
can't find anything else wrong with you, therefore we'll use this label that doesn't really tell you what's wrong with you, but
yeah,
allows us to feel like we're at least giving you a diagnosis.
yeah,
It's, you know, I had, when I was a kid, I had IBS, and I got an IBS diagnosis when I was like 13 or something. And I remember thinking, I told you I had an irritable bowel.
yeah,
Where's my diagnosis? Like, you know,
yeah,
it's like chronic fatigue. It's like you go and say I feel tired all the time, and they say you have chronic fatigue. You say, I know I told you that, but
yeah,
what's actually wrong with me? Like,
yeah,
why? And
yeah,
it's
exactly.
obviously it's a very frustrating experience.
Yeah.
I mean, so what was that like then? So at that point, you had an IBS diagnosis.
Yeah,
You had all the kind of the sleep symptoms, the fatigue symptoms, the
yeah,
digestive symptoms.
yeah,
You were studying nutrition, so you had
yeah.
some knowledge, I guess, through which that you could try and make sense of things. How were you explaining to yourself what was happening? What was your what was your own kind of understanding at that point?
Well, I never thought of chronic fatigue actually because my image of chronic fatigue was that you had to be really, really, really ill. You had to be bedbound to be
Right.
chronic fatigue. Um, so it never occurred to me. And then through a family member, I got in contact with the Optimum Health Clinic, and she told me quite a lot about it. So then I started to see the how do you say that?
A
Um,
connection.
the connection between my
Yeah.
symptoms and actually the work that you do.
Right.
And I think when the doctor told me, like, okay, you have IBS, um, they left me with that. So they said, okay, here's your diagnosis, and that's it. And then I thought, okay, then how do we approach this? So she sent me to a dietitian initially, and they set me on a gluten-free and lactose-free diet. So initially that helps, but then the symptoms were still not getting any better, and
Yes.
they were actually getting worse. So then we started to explore other options, and as she said, like with my nutritional background, we knew quite a lot, and my parents, they helped a lot. So we went to this nutritional therapist actually, and she did a lot of tests like for candida, for your digestive function, all sorts of things for food intolerances. So that was the first time that I actually really got results, like really
Right.
see, okay,
Right.
things are actually not right, and they weren't able to identify that in the hospital. And for me, that was very frustrating. I think that um, the medical help, they could not do anything. They could not identify anything, even though so many things were wrong. And um, that is very frustrating.
Yeah.
So
It is. It is, and I think it only adds to the sense of anxiety and isolation that people experience. But we go to the place where we expect to get guidance and wisdom, and actually what we get is either disbelief or at best lack of direction and guidance. So my understanding is before you came to the Optimum Health Clinic, things then had got worse, and that was the instigation of then wanting to find answers. Is that right?
yeah, exactly. And I got my first answers when I went to that nutritional therapist in Holland.
Yes.
And I did a lot of work with her on so on my guts, on my digestion, all sorts of things. Um, but then at the same time, I had that conversation with a family member, and she said, "Okay, you're doing all this great work, which is really beneficial, but I think there's still so much more that you can improve on." So then she brought me in contact with the Optimum Health Clinic, and I started to look into that. And I thought, okay, well, actually, all my symptoms, they correspond to the work that you're doing. And so I decided to come over for the 90-day program and do the nutrition side as well for the mitochondrial work.
Yes.
So, and I thought then the combination between all that, that's the whole picture that will help. Yeah.
What was it like doing the 90-day program at the start? And was that a difficult stretch to be able to open up to a psycho-emotional aspect to the wider picture? Was there a lot of resistance towards that, or was that something that you felt quite open to?
Um, well, I think the psychological side was not difficult because I was already seeing quite a lot of psychologists like beforehand. So I did quite a lot of work on that, but it never really stuck with me. So it never had a lasting impact, I think. And initially I thought, okay, I don't want to come to the Optimum Health Clinic because I'm not sick enough.
Okay.
I thought really I had to be bedbound to have chronic fatigue, and I thought, oh, everyone who will come there will be sicker than me.
And
So
and how sick were you at that point? Like, out of interest, what did your life look like at that point in terms of what you could do and what you couldn't do?
well, I stopped doing my internship, and my symptoms were like sometimes I was not able to walk. So my boyfriend, really had to support me to get home. Or you're not able to talk, and yeah, you're just too fatigued to talk. My brain function was really poorly. So the whole digestive side, I had problems with urinating. So sometimes I would wet myself actually, which is quite embarrassing, but yeah, it happened. And I had quite some pain. So like looking back, those are really serious symptoms.
Yeah, it's like you were suffering enormously, and it sounds
Yeah,
like that there
yeah,
was a
yeah,
kind of belief system which was
yeah,
that and I don't know if part of that was a kind of not wanting to be put in the category of ME chronic fatigue, or part of it was that there was a kind of lack of acceptance of your own circumstances in a
yeah,
sense.
yeah,
But it sounds like that there was significant suffering on a daily basis
yeah,
that was there. So you came to the 90-day program, and you also did some nutrition work.
yeah,
What was that? What were some of the key lessons that you learned at that point?
yeah. So during the 90-day program, I really noticed that everything that you said, it resonated with me. It made sense. And I did not have that in the past yet. Like that all my symptoms could be explained and you could see them in one picture, basically. Like everything made sense. And it also made sense, like the inner critic side, the being so hard on yourself. And I've always had that. I had to work super hard, so I put so much pressure on myself, and then you start to understand why you're having those symptoms and why you are ill in the first place. And I never thought about that. I knew that, okay, these were my thought patterns and my way of living, basically. And that had such a huge impact on my illness that was really eye-opening to see that, and also quite challenging, I think, to see,
Yes.
okay, on such a fundamental level, I have to change my thought patterns, and I have to change how I live my life, basically.
Yes.
And with the stops and the EFT, then you really start to work through those patterns, and you can make a lasting change, I think. And that's for the first time I thought, okay, like in this way you can really yeah, make a lasting change, basically. And yeah.
And what, as you kind of left the 90-day program with your kind of
Yeah.
your new toolkit and your new understanding in terms of the situation, what was it like putting that into action? Like the kind of, it sounds like it might have felt quite daunting, that the fact that there's this stuff to change. But yeah, what was that initial process like?
Um, well, initially I didn't do that much. Like when I came home, I thought, okay, this is all a bit much, I think. And then I started to read through the booklet, and I started to look at secrets to recovery. And then I had a daily practice, I would say, that I would spend some time every day doing something. So either doing some EFT or doing some stops or doing meditation or doing some yoga, and that daily practice, it really helped me. I think that you know that yeah, I don't know how to explain, but that every day you know, okay, I'm making progress, and you're working
Yes.
towards something, and you start to notice those shifts, and that is really rewarding, I think. And that's also why you know that you can keep on going, because you can see the improvement.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There are few things more calming than recognizing we're making progress.
yeah,
You know, it's like there's a lot of work goes in initially
yeah,
to calming the system and changing thought patterns, and it's like initially it's a bit of a leap of faith, and it's a bit of a kind of step into the dark of knowing, well, I'm doing all this stuff, is it going to make any difference? And sometimes it can almost feel more stressful to
yeah,
feel like we have to kind of, oh my god, it's like, what, so I've got this illness, and now I also have to go and change all of these patterns. It's like it feels almost more overwhelming. And then when we start to see actual changes in our symptoms and actual changes in our circumstances, that firstly has a deeply calming impact, because a lot of the anxiety we experience is also this, as you mentioned earlier, this, what's wrong with me? Why is it wrong with me? Is it going to change? Will I ever get better? So that kind of stuff starts to calm down and starts to settle, and that
yeah,
has an impact.
yeah,
And it becomes much easier to maintain motivation when we can see the fruits of our efforts. But that initial kind of crossing that chasm, as it were, coming back and having this manual and these techniques and all of these kind of things
yeah,
that we're meant to be doing, it does take a certain courage and a certain trust to get to instigate those initial pieces.
yeah,
And sometimes that feedback is very quick, other times it can take a while to start to get that, and that can be a real challenge.
yeah, yeah. And I also think that initially you really need to practice, like, for example, to change certain thought patterns, but now you see that actually it becomes automatic. So I notice something and I know, okay, I can do this and this and this to change it, to
Yes.
get into a calm state. And that can take now maybe 1-2 minutes, whereas in the past it would take substantial, like, practice to really get into a different state.
Yes.
And also I
Yes.
remember when I was at the 90-day program, you talk about being tired and wired, and I thought, like, what does that mean? I did not get it. And then once you're in a different stage, you actually notice, like, wow, now I know what it feels like to be tired and worried, because
Right.
you're out of it, basically. So
I remember in the early years of working as a practitioner and kind of starting to really identify that quality in people, and
yeah,
I would ask people, do you feel anxious, and quite have the language of tired and wired at that point. And I'm not exaggerating when I say there were some people who would say no, whilst they were literally kind of swinging in the chair. They just couldn't keep their body still, because there was so much kind of wired energy that was there. But
yeah,
they were so normalized to being in that state,
yeah,
they didn't actually realize they were in that state. And it's a little bit like, if you might have heard this analogy at the 90-day program, it's a bit like if you put a frog in a glass of boiling water, it'll jump out. If you put a frog in a glass of cold water and you gradually heat the water up, it'll stay in there, and it'll get cooked.
yeah,
Not an experiment that, that I've personally done, but so I'm told on good authority. So it's a little bit like that, I think, with tired and wired, that we get so normalized to being in that state that we know that we feel terrible and we feel exhausted and we feel we feel irritable, and perhaps we're not sleeping well and all those kind of things.
yeah,
But it's, as you say, it's only when we come out of that state
yeah,
that actually we calm our system. Then we have a contrast. It's a little bit like being in a cold English winter. I guess you can get similar winters in the Netherlands, but
yeah,
kind of cold winter. And when winter first starts, everyone's a bit kind of grumpy because the season changes. Then you kind of normalize it, and as
yeah,
it gradually changes to summer, one doesn't notice. But if you get on a plane and you go somewhere hot and you get off and you get suddenly this wall of heat, it's such a contrast that it's only then you realize how cold and damp it's been for the last 4 or 5 months. So it's the
Yeah.
kind of the contrast that helps us identify the difference. And then, of course, it becomes much easier to calm, tired, and wired when you can identify it so much more
Yeah.
quickly and easily.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So you were using the tools and techniques. You were kind of back home. How
Yeah.
long did it take to start? I remember seeing in the notes that Jenny shared that it took a while for things to start to change. To talk us through that process.
Yeah. So initially, when I got home, I said, okay, I didn't start doing the exercises daily, but quite soon I did. And I went through several phases. So I think at a certain point, EFT helped me a lot. And then another point, the stop process helped me. And yeah, just feeling whatever is right for you at that moment, um, and doing that. And I was also doing a lot of meditation, and that helped a lot. And I started to build up doing more yoga. But I think the progress of really feeling better, that was very gradual, and you could see the improvement when you look back, like on certain events. So if you look back a year, like for my birthday, for example, or for Christmas or New Year's, what I'm able to do now and what I'm able to do a year ago or 2 years ago, then you can really see the improvement, basically.
Yes, yes. And
Um,
what were there
yeah.
particular kind of milestones or particular things that you did that you hadn't been able to do before, and it was kind of those moments where you really were able to go, oh wow, and it was like, yeah, any particularly significant moments like that you remember?
Um, I think, yeah, that's just something I remember, is being able to watch the news and actually um, understand it and remember it. That was really big for me, because um, I would often watch TV and not, um, yeah, I would not understand what was going on. So it would be too much input, I think.
Yes,
Um,
like cognitively you couldn't
yeah,
process, and yeah,
yeah,
that makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah, definitely. And also, yeah, the fact that you don't have to think about certain things anymore. So you can be spontaneous, and you can see friends, and you can work and see friends at night and not think about that. And that was really big as well, that you can plan your week, and if something comes up, you can deal with that. Whereas in the past, it would be way too much. And if you have one thing during the day, that's enough. And yeah, so being a lot more flexible and being a lot more spontaneous. Um, then I started to notice, wow, I was not able to do this 2 years ago or 1 year ago, So those kind of things that,
Yeah,
yeah,
that makes a lot of sense, and
yeah,
it's without intending to be flippant, being able to not process the news right now with all the Brexit stuff in the UK would be quite an appealing prospect.
yeah,
So, but I
yeah,
think it's interesting that it's those kind of significant, it's like those things we take for granted,
yeah,
that we suddenly realize that we can do something like that, and actually those things can matter more than others, because it's something very normalizing about being able to kind of function
yeah,
in a normal way. And how about the nutrition side? Because obviously you'd already done some work initially, and it was an area that you were training in, but
yeah,
anything particular in terms of the work I think you're working with Helen in
yeah,
Optimum Health Clinic. So yeah, just a little bit about that would be interesting.
yeah. So actually, with Helen, we decided that all the testing that I did in the Netherlands, I would keep on doing with my nutritional therapist in the Netherlands. So all the digestive issues, the food intolerances, those kind of things. And I was also receiving quite a lot of supplements for that already. So Helen, she really focused on the mitochondria function
Okay.
and getting that tested, and then based on those tests, getting really specific supplements. So that's actually all we did, and that
Right.
helped a lot. Yeah.
And what was the impact of that?
Well, it took a long time because there were some blockages, and we really had to work through that. But yeah, it had a huge impact, just energy-wise, that you're not fatigued during the day anymore, that you're able to keep on going basically throughout the day and then the evening as well.
Yes.
So really noticing that your energy production is also better.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Great. And whereabouts do you find yourself now in terms of so having been through that process with 90-day program and the kind of calming your system and working on the patterns, and Helen in conjunction with the work that you were doing locally, yeah, what's life like at this point?
Well, I would say I'm not 100% yet, but I'm very close.
Yeah.
And I've worked now for about a year. So I was able to build that up quite in a flexible way, I would say. So at the moment, I work 4 days per week and then 2 days from home. So it's fairly nice that I have that flexibility and that you're able to build it up in that way, I would say. Um, and now I think you know what to do. So if you're feeling um, fatigued or you're feeling anxious or you notice that something's coming up, I know, okay, I have to take some more time for myself, or I have to do this, or I have to do that. And you know that it works. And that's really, how do you say that? Calming to
Right.
know, okay, I'll be okay, even though something might come on. I know how to handle it.
Yes.
Whereas in the past, a symptom would come on and you would have no clue what to do. Now you have a plan basically,
Right.
and that's really good.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're in the final stages of the reintegration stage 3. So you're coming back into life, and it's kind of building up your stamina, building up your resilience, building up your energy reserves.
Yeah,
And that's a product of continuing to do the right things and enough time to pass with that. It's almost, I think one of the ways that's helpful to think about it is it's almost like we have a deficit, or we have a debt, and let's say that debt is £10,000 and we're paying off a few £100s a week, and we're kind of gradually paying that off, and then we get to the point that we've paid off to zero. So no longer do we have the debt, no longer do we have the fatigue and the symptoms,
yeah,
but we haven't yet got any reserves in the bank account. And so if one day the boiler breaks and we have to get a plumber out to fix the boiler, suddenly we've got to find a few £100s to pay the plumber. Suddenly, if we're only at zero, we're actually back into deficit for a week until we kind of come back again. So we
yeah,
need to build enough reserves, or using the metaphor, enough savings, that we can have the boiler pack up, the car break down, lose our job, and all these kind of things happen. And okay, we have to draw down on the reserves to support it, but we have enough reserves to be able to do that. And so I think that often there can be a misunderstanding that people think recovery is about getting back to zero. It's paying off the debt, it's getting rid of symptoms. And that is the end of, at that point, one would no longer meet diagnostic criteria for ME chronic fatigue, for example. But there are additional stages beyond recovery, as it were, to build up one's full resilience. And that sometimes can be another 1 to 2 years after getting back to zero and recovery, to really build those reserves and that resilience. So then we're not living a life which is a a careful life that we feel like we always have to be a bit cautious. We can fully throw ourselves into life, but it takes some time to build up the resilience and the reserves to do that. In a moment, if people do want to post questions in the comment section below the video, if there are some questions, I know people have been posting some comments, if there are some questions, we can come to those. But before we do that, just maybe a little bit about what are some of the, would you say, the most important lessons that you feel you've learned along the way? Like, as you look back, if you could sit down with you, you know, a number of years ago, and what would you want you to know?
Yeah, that's a really good question, I think mainly I did a lot of work on the inner critic. So just being kind for yourself and not being so incredibly hard on yourself, because I think I'm very good at being very hard on myself and very kind for other people. But then
Right.
recognizing that if you want to be there for others or be able to do work, that first of all, you have to take care of yourself and you have to make sure that you are okay, and then prioritize yourself and know that it's okay to say no sometimes to some people, um, just to make sure that you're okay. And yeah, I also did a lot of work around self acceptance. So recognizing the situation that you're in and accepting that, and not belittling yourself. So not making your symptoms less than they are. I think that's really important. So really recognizing what is going on and being fair towards yourself. So I think those things were really important for me. Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like one of the things that you'd learned to be quite. The fact that you were saying it can't be chronic fatigue
Yeah.
because I'm not bedbound, and yet then you listed actually the amount of
Yeah.
symptoms and suffering that were actually there.
Yeah.
And I think that's common. I think in different ways it's common for a lot of people, that even when there's a recognition that things are not quote unquote normal, there can still be a kind of a resistance or a denial of the fact that someone has a severe chronic illness of which the primary symptom is fatigue,
Yeah.
and the best resolution for fatigue is rest. And there's a kind of denial and avoidance of that even though one's life can be quite significantly adapted to compensate for the lack of energy, there's still on some level this kind of resistance or avoidance of attending to what needs to be attended to.
Yeah.
Anything else anything else that you'd like to share in terms of key lessons or things that you would want people watching this that perhaps are where you were a few years ago that you'd want them to know?
Yeah, I think also one of my main thought patterns, which is quite harming, I think, is that I was saying to myself, well, if other people don't see it, or what do other people think about my symptoms? Do they think it's bad enough? And those kind of things, I think that can really impact the way that you look at your symptoms. And so I think that's something to look out for, to not be so worried about what other people think and what other people see, rather than just listening to your body, listening to your symptoms, and being true to that, basically.
Yes.
They're two different things, and yeah.
Yeah, it can be very, very easy, as you say, to need that outside validation. And of course,
Yeah.
it's very difficult when
Yeah.
you're suffering from an illness that most people don't understand.
Yeah.
Therefore, when you go to get validation, you don't get validation, you get confusion.
Yeah.
And that confusion then just compounds what the difficulty of one's own situation. I'm struggling to read comments on my computer, so I'm just going to look on my phone. I know there's There's some comments. I'm not sure if there are actual questions. If people do want to post questions, feel free. But just let me just have a look, see if it loads them better. Oops. No, that's disconcerting. I can hear myself talking on my phone now. turn the sound off. Let's have a look. People saying hi. People saying happy to hear recovery stories. People saying, Jane saying it wasn't until she began to accept it instead of fight it that she felt herself improving. That sounds obviously similar to your experience. Dilly's just sending off her mitochondrial stuff, so excited to get into that. Kath was saying rest, not beating oneself up, has been crucial. And Diana's saying, learning that just because I'm feeling a bit better, it does not mean I don't have CFS anymore. I can go back to the point that's saying. Nikki, Nikki from the psychology team's got a question actually. With all the inner critic work you have now done, how do you handle it now if other people judge you? So kind of how would you respond differently to outside judgment with the work that you've been doing?
Well, I think I would look at it from a distance, or at least try to look at it from a distance, because initially I think it would still have an impact on me, but not as much as in the past. And recognizing that it's someone else's judgment or opinion, and then objectively looking at it and seeing, do I agree with it or not? And also recognizing that it is okay to have a different opinion. So to see this is someone else's opinion and my opinion is different, and that's completely okay. And not get stressed out about it or worried about it that, oh, they are thinking differently and that's bad. No, it's just different. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's well put, and I think it's almost, the more awareness we have, the more we can see what's happening. It doesn't mean it necessarily stops happening, but I think it has less of a powerful impact on us somehow. And I think, you know, sometimes it is really appropriate to just, you know, tell other people to keep their opinions to themselves, and not necessarily a confrontational way, but in a way where it sounds like historically your compassion was in bucket loads for everyone else and limited to yourself. And sometimes the most compassionate thing for ourselves is actually to say, do you know what, that's not okay. Belinda was saying it's very easy to do too much when feeling better, having to realize still to pace herself. And I'm wondering if that was something that's been, I think often that can be a challenge in stage 3, where energy's coming back, we're starting to do things that we love that we've not been able to do, and how to kind of rein in the enthusiasm at that point.
I think still today I have almost daily that I do yoga or I do meditation. So I reserve time in the day for myself to take it easy. And also, so I said I work 4 days per week, but I spread the hours over 5 days.
Right.
So I make sure that every day I have enough time to rest. And I know now that I'm okay with that. Whereas in the past, I would think, oh, I have to work the full day, or I have to do so much because other people are doing it as well. It doesn't mean that I have to do that, because I'm very different. I have a very different background. So people from my age who are working full time and then also doing things at night, they don't have the same illness as I used to have. So you don't have to compare yourself to other people, and just do what feels right for your body.
And I think that's really appropriate for the stage of recovery you're at. And I think it's a really good message for people to hear, that the point for one to take the stabilizers off the bike and just go full in is
Yeah.
the point where the body is fully ready to do that. And the only way you get to that point is by managing this stage in the way that you're managing it. If we keep trying to jump ahead too quickly, we just keep on collapsing back. And it's so important to honor where our body is, because that is the path that allows us to go the next stage in the process. Is there anything else that you wanted to share before we come to a close?
No, I think that was about it. I think, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, also, happy birthday for tomorrow. I remember you said mentioned at the start you were tracking before we started broadcasting. You were tracking kind of time, and you mentioned it was your birthday tomorrow. So happy birthday for tomorrow. And yeah, thank you very much for making the time to share your story. I really appreciate it, and I know people watching appreciate it as well. And I'm sure there'll be kind of more comments, and it's great people to share their reflections and their experiences on the comment section below. And we're going to do more recovery stories like this. We've got a session planned, I think it's in a couple of weeks' time, with Helen Lynham, who Paulie mentioned, who's going to do, I don't know what topic is yet. I'm not sure she knows the topic yet, but we're going to do we'll do something looking at from nutrition point of view. One of the things this year is we're going to have a lot more of the nutrition team coming into these sessions. It's been a bit psychology heavy because that's obviously the area that I can speak to more easily. So we're going to start to balance that more this year. Yeah, thank you everyone for watching, and bye-bye for now. Thank you again, Paulie.
Thank you. Bye.